Imagine for a second that you live in this sprawling 30-year-old high-rise building.
Right.
And you've lived there your whole life. I mean, it houses absolutely everything you care about, right? Your bank, your workplace, your personal records, family photos, all of it.
Everything.
Everything. But then imagine discovering that the actual blueprints to this building are just, being auctioned off to international criminal syndicates, like on a daily basis.
Yeah, just out in the open.
Exactly. And worse, you find out that the locks on your front door, they were originally designed by an architect whose only goal was to make them as easy as possible to open.
Because back then, everyone knew each other.
Right, because when the building was constructed, everyone in the neighborhood was friendly. And, well, that is the internet today. I mean, the foundation was built for open connection, right? And not for defense against massive coordinated sieges.
Or this highly lucrative global market where, vulnerabilities are actively traded like commodities.
Exactly like commodities. And so, like any aging structure that's never had a real foundational renovation, this digital building is showing severe structural cracks. The load-bearing walls are thin, the foundation is settling, and frankly, the water is just pouring in.
It really is. I mean, when you look back at the origins of protocols like TCP/IP, the foundational language of the internet, it was basically an architecture of optimism.
An architecture of optimism. I like that phrasing.
Yeah, because it was just academic institutions and researchers trying to share data efficiently. That was it. Authentication, encryption, the whole concept of zero trust, none of that was baked into the bedrock.
It was all just bolted on decades later.
Bolted on, exactly. So now we're operating this massive global digital economy on a foundation that inherently assumes trust. But we live in a world where trust has become the single biggest vulnerability.
Which brings us to today's deep dive. Because today is all about exploring exactly how those structural cracks are being exploited right now, and more importantly, how the defenders are scrambling to patch them.
And we have some really fascinating source material for this.
We do. Our roadmap today comes directly from Jorge Blanco. He's the director of the CISO office, a chief information security officer for Iberia and Latin America at Google.
Right.
And he recently laid out the Google Cloud Security Forecasts for 2026. And the implications in this report, they fundamentally reshape how you need to think about digital risk.
They do, but I think it's really essential to approach Blanco's forecast and all this data from Google's threat intelligence teams with a very analytical mindset.
Rather than an emotional one.
Exactly, because when you examine cybersecurity at this scale, nation states and multi-billion-dollar syndicates, it is so easy to slip into alarmism, to just panic.
Oh, for sure. It sounds like science fiction sometimes.
Right. But the objective here is synthesis. We are analyzing a profound shift in the operational mechanics of both everyday businesses and state actors. It's not about panic. It's about recognizing the new physical laws of the digital realm so you can actually maneuver within them.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because to understand the Google forecast for 2026, we really have to look at the immediate present, right?
We need a baseline.
Exactly. We need to measure the width of the cracks in our 30-year-old building today. And the analysis points to a few massive recent breaches that just perfectly illustrate the mechanics of modern compromise. So let's start with Coupang.
Coupang, right?
For those who might be unfamiliar, Coupang operates at a scale very similar to Amazon, but they're heavily focused on the South Korean market. They are an absolute e-commerce leviathan.
A leviathan that operates a hyper-complex logistics and data network, yeah. I mean, when you process millions of transactions a day, your digital footprint is just immense.
And that immense footprint just suffered an exposure impacting 33 million customers.
33 million.
Yeah. But here's the mechanism I really want to dig into, because the surface level narrative just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, this is a massive tech company.
Right.
They actually faced a 72 million euro fine previously for a completely different data breach. So the regulatory pressure on them is astronomical.
They definitely have the budget for security.
They have the budget, they have the mandate, and presumably they have the best tools money can buy. Yet the forensic analysis indicates the attackers were inside their systems for months.
Months, yes.
Not days, months. How does an intrusion team walk the halls of a multi-billion-dollar network for an entire fiscal quarter without tripping a single alarm? I don't get it.
Well, to understand that, you have to look at the mechanics of what the industry calls dwell time, and specifically the tactics of advanced persistent threats. In this case, the intrusion is widely attributed to the Lazarus Group.
Okay.
The assumption most people make is that a hack is this loud, chaotic event. Right?
Like in the movies, red screen, siren.
Exactly. Malware is deployed, alarms go off. But sophisticated actors, they just don't operate that way anymore. They utilize a strategy known as living off the land.
Meaning they don't bring their own weapons. They just use what's already lying around the environment.
Precisely. Think about it. If you write custom malware and drop it onto a target server, the endpoint detection software is going to analyze that file, flag its signature as malicious, and quarantine it immediately.
Because it looks foreign.
Because it's a loud action. It's an unrecognized file. So instead of bringing custom malware, attackers compromise a single legitimate credential.
Just one password.
Just one. And once they're inside, they use the exact same administrative tools that the company's actual IT department uses every single day. They use PowerShell, they use Windows management instrumentation.
Oh, wow.
They aren't smashing windows, right? They're basically putting on a janitor's uniform and sweeping the floors while they map out the building.
That completely reframes the whole concept of network visibility.
Yeah.
Because if I'm the CISO at Coupang, and I'm looking at a dashboard of network traffic, the attacker's traffic looks functionally identical to my senior system administrator, just, running a routine database backup.
It's the mathematical problem of the noise floor.
The noise floor.
Yeah. In a network the size of Coupang, you have tens of thousands of employees logging in from different IP addresses, VPNs, mobile devices. You have microservices communicating with each other constantly.
Just a massive amount of data.
You are generating terabytes of log data every hour. So finding a sophisticated attacker in that environment, it's not looking for a needle in a haystack. It's looking for a piece of hay that is just slightly sharper than the rest of the hay.
Man. So the vast resources of the company actually provide the acoustic camouflage the attacker needs to operate silently.
Exactly. They map the architecture, they locate the crown jewels, in this case, the customer databases, and they slowly stage that data for exfiltration without ever crossing the threshold of a security alert.
So the scale of the enterprise is practically weaponized against itself.
It really is.
That brings a pretty chilling context to the second incident highlighted in the recent data, which is the extortion of Iberia Airlines.
Right, the Iberia incident.
Yeah. According to threat intelligence tracked by Hackmanac, this cybercriminal collective demanded a $6 million ransom to prevent the release of stolen Iberia data. But what really fascinates me here isn't just the ransom demand itself.
It's what they stole.
Yes. It's the specific nature of the data. Because we usually think of data breaches in terms of credit card numbers or like social security numbers. But this extortion heavily involved stolen flight miles.
Flight miles.
Yeah. It's a literal hostage situation. But the hostages are loyalty program points. I mean, it perfectly illustrates how every single digital asset, no matter how secondary it might seem to the core business, has a liquid value in the underground economy.
Oh, absolutely. Airline miles are highly fungible digital currency.
Really? How so?
Well, they can be traded, sold, or used to purchase high-value goods and travel, which are then resold for clean fiat currency. It's actually a highly efficient money laundering mechanism.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah. However, when we analyze incidents surfaced by groups like Hackmanac, we really have to apply a rigorous filter to the intelligence.
Okay, why is that?
Well, Hackmanac monitors underground forums, right? Places like breach forums or various Telegram channels where these threat actors operate. And you have to remember the fundamental nature of these threat actors. They are running a business.
Right. And every business has a marketing department.
Exactly. The claims made on a dark web forum are not always definitive forensic proof of a novel breach.
Oh, so they might be lying.
Often. There is a massive PR and reputation economy in the cybercriminal underground. If a ransomware affiliate wants to attract better partners, or if an initial access broker wants to charge premium prices for compromised credentials, they have to demonstrate clout.
They have to look successful.
Yes. So frequently, we see actors take an old, previously leaked database, cross-reference it with some open-source intelligence. Maybe they scrape some LinkedIn profiles to update the emails, and then they repackage the entire data set.
And announce it as a brand new hack.
Exactly. They announce it to the world as a devastating zero-day hack of a major corporation.
Just to artificially inflate their threat profile and force the company to the negotiating table?
Yep. Because if you are Iberia and the press is suddenly reporting that you've been breached, your stock price takes a hit.
Customer trust plummets.
And the pressure to just pay the $6 million to make the headline go away is immense, regardless of whether the data is actually new.
Wow. It's an extortion model built entirely on information asymmetry.
Precisely. The company has to spend weeks conducting internal forensic audits just to prove that a breach didn't happen. But the threat actor, they only need 30 seconds to post a sensational claim on a forum.
So while the threat to Iberia and, similar targets is undeniably real, the analysis of these incidents requires us to understand that cybercriminals manipulate media narratives and public perception just as skillfully as they manipulate code.
It's all part of the game.
It is a profoundly asymmetric warfare environment. I mean, you have patient attackers hiding in the noise for months and criminal syndicates running sophisticated psychological operations. It paints a pretty bleak picture of the defensive posture.
It does sound bleak, but the ecosystem isn't static.
Right. The good guys aren't just sitting around waiting to be breached. There is a massive mobilization happening on the defense side, and it seems to rely heavily on aggregation.
Aggregation and collaboration.
Yeah. Just look at the scale of the recent Cybersecurity Summit in Madrid. It consolidated the 19th ESTIC CCN-CERT conference, the 7th Joint Cyberspace Command Conference, and the Rooted Congress at Kanepolis.
That was a massive event.
Massive. We were talking about over 8,000 attendees, 220 distinct technical sessions, and 300 expert speakers.
And the sheer density of that gathering is a direct response to the asymmetry we just discussed, because historically, network defense was very siloed.
Everyone just protecting their own turf.
Right. A bank protected its network, an airline protected its network, and they rarely talked to each other. Government intelligence agencies operated in a completely different sphere. But the operational reality of modern cyber threats has forced a paradigm shift.
Because the attackers are definitely talking to each other.
Exactly. The threat actors share intelligence, they sell exploits to each other, they operate on a collaborative franchise model, like ransomware as a service. So the defense has realized it simply cannot survive if it remains fragmented.
So a conference of that magnitude, it isn't just a networking event. It's the actual operationalization of public-private collaboration.
Yeah.
You have military cyberspace command sitting in the exact same room as cloud architects from Google and independent penetration testers.
Because the military has visibility into nation-state infrastructure, Google has visibility into global internet traffic patterns, and the independent researchers are out there finding the zero-day vulnerabilities in the software that both the military and Google rely on.
Right.
If those three entities do not share telemetry in real time, the hackers will just find the seams between their jurisdictions and exploit them. So the Madrid summit is indicative of this new defensive architecture, integrating intelligence streams so that an attack on a retail company in South Korea instantly generates a defensive signature for a telecom provider in Spain.
And as that intelligence integrates, we're seeing the defense industry fundamentally re-engineer its approach to the actual combat layer of cybersecurity.
All right.
Yes, a major shift is happening there.
Because with thousands of experts analyzing these breaches, the consensus is shifting away from human-driven analysis toward extreme automation.
It has to.
And the Google forecast heavily features this transition. It was perfectly encapsulated by a startup success story out of the InCyb and Prunde program.
Oh, Vapasec.
Yes. They awarded their top boost to a company called Vapasec, which was founded by Pablo Sanamaterio, who I think during the broadcast they affectionately referred to as the guy in the hoodie.
Yeah, a true hacker ethos.
Exactly. But the core of Vapasec's winning proposal was web protection MDR-managed detection and response, but with a really critical distinction. It is fully autonomous.
And this is the inflection point for the entire industry. To really understand why autonomous defense is not just innovative, but mathematically mandatory, we have to look at the limitations of legacy security operation centers, the SOCs. Okay, so the traditional model of a SOC is basically a room full of analysts staring at monitors, waiting for an alert to turn red.
Right, pretty much.
It's the digital equivalent of a security guard patrolling our metaphorical high-rise building. But a human guard has biological limits. They experience alert fatigue.
Major alert fatigue. If they see 1,000 harmless anomalies a day, they might miss the one malicious anomaly on day 101.
Exactly. And more importantly, a website or an API endpoint doesn't sleep. It is exposed to the public internet 24/7, being probed by automated botnets thousands of times a minute.
And that is the crux of the arms race right there, because the attackers automated their offensive operations a decade ago.
They aren't typing this stuff out manually.
No, of course not. They do not have humans manually typing SQL injection commands into a web form. They use distributed scripts that scan the entire IPv4 address space looking for an unpatched vulnerability. And when they find one, The script autonomously executes the exploit payload in milliseconds.
Milliseconds. So if your defensive posture relies on a human analyst receiving a log alert, interpreting that alert, writing a firewall rule, and then deploying it.
You have already lost. The exfiltration is over before the analyst has even finished their coffee.
Wow. So Vapasec's Autonomous Web Protection MDR, it acts less like a security guard and more like a biological immune system.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
It establishes a baseline of what normal, healthy traffic looks like for a specific web application. And the moment it detects a deviation from that baseline, even a novel attack it has never seen before, it doesn't send an email to a human asking for permission to act.
Right, doesn't wait.
It autonomously isolates the threat, blocks the IP, or no-roots the traffic instantaneously.
It's the migration from signature-based detection to behavioral anomaly detection driven by machine learning. You are fighting algorithms with faster, more context-aware algorithms.
So where does the human fit in?
The human is removed from the execution loop and elevated to the governance loop. The human sets the parameters of the immune system, but the immune system fights the infection on its own.
That transition from manual human analysis to algorithmic immune systems, I think that serves as the perfect conceptual bridge to the most critical pillar of the Google Cloud Security 2026 forecast.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about algorithms operating autonomously at scale, we are fundamentally talking about the maturation of artificial intelligence.
AI is the accelerant for every single trend we have discussed so far, bar none.
A forecast from Blanco and the Google team makes a really vital chronological distinction here. Because if you look at 2023 and 2024, that was the hype cycle, right?
Absolutely.
The peak of the hype.
Generative AI and large language models just exploded into the public consciousness. Every company launched a pilot program. Every threat actor tested a chatbot to see if it could write a phishing email. It was experimental.
Very experimental. But the projection for 2026 is that AI drops the experimental tag entirely. It transitions from a novelty to the baseline standard operating procedure for both defense and offense.
And we need to examine exactly how that operationalization changes the attacker's toolkit, because the capabilities of generative AI have moved far beyond drafting emails with perfect grammar.
Right.
Attackers are integrating AI into the earliest stages of the kill chain, reconnaissance and target selection. Historically, mapping out a target organization took weeks of manual labor.
An attacker had to, scrape LinkedIn, read corporate press releases?
Yeah, read press releases, guess the reporting structures, figure out who reports to who. It took a long time.
Now
They can feed a massive raw data set of public internet scrape into an LLM with a huge context window. They can just ask the AI, analyze the communication patterns of this company's executive board, identify the CFO's most likely trusted vendor, and draft a communication sequence that perfectly mimics the tone, vocabulary, and cadence of the CEO requesting an urgent wire transfer to that vendor.
that is terrifying.
The AI does in 30 seconds what used to take a human intelligence analyst a month.
And the output is no longer restricted to text either. I mean, the integration of multimodal AI means audio and video deepfakes are now practically trivial to generate and deploy in real time.
We're seeing active social engineering campaigns that utilize voice cloning to bypass human verification protocols every day.
Yeah, and there was a highly specific and frankly bone-chilling anecdote shared during the broadcast regarding exactly this.
Oh, the dollar incident?
Yes. So a threat group targeted a corporate executive using a sophisticated audio deepfake. They cloned the voice of a trusted superior and attempted to authorize a fraudulent high-value transaction over a phone call.
Over a live phone call.
Live call. And the attack was incredibly close to succeeding. The only reason the human on the receiving end paused and aborted the transaction was because the AI model hallucinated on a single word.
Just one word.
It attempted to say the word dollar, right? But instead of using the proper Spanish phonetic inflection, the underlying text-to-speech engine rendered it with this hard, English-centric pronunciation.
Right, dollar.
Exactly. And that tiny, momentary linguistic glitch, literally a microsecond of audio, was the only thread that unraveled the entire illusion.
It's a fascinating case study in the current limitations of synthetic media. It primarily stems from the English language bias in the foundational training data sets of a lot of these commercial models.
The takeaway from that anecdote shouldn't be relief, right?
No, absolutely not. It should be a profound sense of urgency, because the mechanism of AI development is iterative and exponential.
The human caught the air this time.
But consider the feedback loop of the attacker.
Right, because the Google analysts explicitly quantified this. They noted that correcting that specific phone rendering error, it doesn't require rebuilding the whole engine.
Not at all.
It takes an attacker approximately 2 days of fine-tuning the model's language parameters. They tweak the weights, run the generation again, and that specific phonetic mistake is permanently eradicated from their arsenal.
That is the core implication here. We are rapidly approaching a threshold where human perception, our actual biological ability to hear a voice or see a face on a video call and verify its authenticity, will be entirely obsolete as a security control.
Obsolete.
Yes. If the attacker can patch their social engineering flaws in 48 hours, then relying on employees to, listen for robotic speech patterns or look for weird blinking in a video, that is a failed strategy.
Because there won't be any weird blinking.
Exactly. The AI will perfectly emulate the organic imperfections of human speech. When you can no longer trust your eyes and ears, the entire architecture of corporate communication has to shift to cryptographic verification. You shouldn't trust a voice request unless it is accompanied by a mathematically verifiable token.
Wow. And as the AI perfects its ability to hack the human through social engineering, it is simultaneously perfecting its ability to hack the machine.
It is.
Which brings me to a point of tension in the current technical landscape that I'd love your take on. Because if you talk to software engineers today about using current generation LLMs to write complex code, the consensus is that it's still, pretty messy.
Very messy, yeah.
The hosts on the broadcast even joke that asking an AI to write sophisticated malware right now is like kicking the dictionary around.
That's a great phrase.
It generates code that looks structurally sound but often fails to compile, or it utilizes deprecated libraries. So if AI is still struggling with the syntax of clean code, is AI-generated malware truly the existential threat it's made out to be?
It's a vital distinction to make between the reality of today and the forecast for 2026. You are absolutely correct that right now, if a script kiddie asks a public chatbot to write a ransomware payload, the output is going to be clumsy.
It's basically garbage.
It'll be riddled with recognizable patterns and inefficient logic. A skilled malware analyst or an autonomous system like Vapasec can reverse engineer and neutralize that AI-generated code almost instantly because it behaves predictably.
Right.
But the forecast isn't about today's models. It is about the trajectory of autonomous code generation. The prediction is the emergence of perfected autonomous AI malware.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. How do we get from clumsy to perfect?
It requires moving away from the idea of AI as just a simple code assistant. You have to conceptualize it as an autonomous agent operating within the target environment.
Okay.
Future iterations of AI-driven malware won't just be static files generated on the attacker's machine and sent to the victim. The malware itself will contain a lightweight model.
The AI is inside the malware.
Exactly. Once it infiltrates a network, it will autonomously analyze the specific defensive software running on that specific server, and then it will dynamically rewrite its own source code, compiling a novel, completely unique variant of itself that is mathematically designed to evade that specific defense.
So it's extreme polymorphism.
Extreme polymorphism. Traditional antivirus relies on hashes, right?
The unique cryptographic fingerprints of known bad files.
Right. But if the AI malware recompiles itself every single time it moves to a new machine, the hash changes every second. It becomes invisible to traditional telemetry. And it does this without needing instructions from a human command and control server. It learns, mutates, and executes the attack lifecycle completely autonomously.
Man, that is the 2026 threat landscape Google is preparing for.
That's the external threat, yes.
Right, the external threat, because that presents a staggering challenge for external defense. But the Google analysis introduces a massive twist to the narrative here.
A very concerning twist.
Because AI is not just a weapon being wielded against the perimeter by external threat actors. It is a tool being carried directly past the firewall into the absolute center of the enterprise by the company's own employees.
Yes.
And the forecast defines this as the era of shadow agents, or shadow AI.
This is perhaps the most complex challenge CISOs face today, because it isn't driven by malice. It is driven by the fundamental economic incentive of productivity.
Right. To understand shadow agents, we all know the historical headaches of shadow IT, right?
Oh, yeah. A classic problem.
A classic scenario where a marketing department needs a new database, but the official IT procurement process takes 6 months. So the marketing director just takes out a corporate credit card, spins up a cloud server on AWS, and bypasses the IT department entirely.
It gets the job done faster.
It does. But it creates a massive blind spot for the security team who has no idea that server even exists, let alone whether it is patched or secured.
Right.
Shadow agents are the 2026 evolution of that exact behavioral pattern, but the risk profile is exponentially worse.
Because with Shadow IT, you were generally just migrating data to an unmanaged server. But with Shadow AI, you are actively feeding proprietary data into a black box intelligence engine owned by a third party.
Yeah. I was trying to contextualize the severity of this, and I keep coming back to this analogy.
Let's hear it.
Imagine one of your senior analysts has a massive, highly sensitive financial modeling project due by the end of the week. They are totally overwhelmed. So, without telling anyone, they decide to secretly bring an incredibly brilliant, savant-level intern into the building to help them crunch the numbers.
Okay, I see where this is going.
This intern works at lightning speed and delivers perfect results. But here is the fatal flaw. This intern has never been vetted by HR. They haven't signed a non-disclosure agreement, they aren't on the payroll, and you have absolutely no technical control over what that intern does with the highly confidential financial data once they leave the building.
That analogy perfectly isolates the exposure mechanism. I mean, when an employee takes a massive block of proprietary source code to debug, or, a spreadsheet containing thousands of confidential client records, and they just paste that data into a free, public-facing AI chatbot.
They have effectively breached their own company.
Yes. That data is transmitted outside the corporate perimeter. Depending on the terms of service of that specific AI provider, your proprietary data may now be ingested as training weight for the next iteration of their public model.
You have literally surrendered your intellectual property to the public domain simply because an employee wanted to format a table faster.
Exactly. It's a staggering risk.
So, the natural reflexive instinct for a security professional facing that kind of uncontrollable data hemorrhage would be absolute prohibition.
Right.
You update the firewall rules to block every known AI endpoint. You ban the use of external chatbots, write a strict policy, and threaten termination for anyone caught violating it. You just slam the door shut.
And this is where the Google Cloud Security Forecast provides highly counterintuitive guidance, because they explicitly and emphatically advise against the draconian approach of prohibition.
Really? Because the employees will just mutiny.
Because prohibition in the face of massive technological utility always fails. Always. And it actually creates a more dangerous environment.
How so?
If you block the AI tools on the corporate network, two things happen immediately. First, your organization willingly abandons the massive generational productivity gains that these tools offer.
Right. Your competitors who figure out how to use AI securely will just outpace you in development, analysis, output.
Exactly. You render your own company uncompetitive. And second, you do not actually stop the behavior, you merely drive it further into the dark.
So the employee with the deadline, they're still going to use the AI.
Without a doubt.
They will just disconnect from the corporate VPN, use their personal smartphone, scan the confidential document, and run it through the AI on an untracked cellular network.
Yep. And now you have a data leak, and you don't even have the network logs to prove it happened. You lose all visibility.
Wow. Okay, so what is the solution if you can't ban it?
Instead of prohibition, Google advocates for governance and enablement. The architectural solution is to build sanctioned, secure pathways for AI adoption. You don't tell the employee, no AI. You provide them with an enterprise-tier AI model that is contractually walled off.
So you give them the brilliant intern, but you make sure the intern signs the NDA and never leaves the secure facility.
Precisely. You deploy internal APIs where the data fed into the model is guaranteed by contract and cryptographic design not to be retained or used for external training.
That makes sense.
But accompanying that technical architecture must be a massive evolution in user education. You cannot rely on a 30-minute annual compliance video anymore.
Right, click next to finish.
Exactly. You have to treat employees as active partners in the security ecosystem. When you provide the secure AI tool, you explicitly explain the mechanics of why the public tool is dangerous. When employees truly understand that pasting code into a public model could literally give a rival company access to their hard work, compliance ceases to be an IT mandate and becomes a personal protective measure.
It's about changing the culture.
Exactly.
So we have external attackers automating their strikes with AI and internal employees accidentally acting as insider threats through shadow AI. The attack surface is just expanding in all directions.
It is expanding rapidly.
But whether we are discussing a hyper-advanced polymorphic AI payload or a simple phishing email, The primary motivator driving the vast majority of this global activity remains entirely unchanged. It is the pursuit of capital.
Money. Always money.
Which leads us directly into the second major pillar of the Google report, the evolution of economically motivated cybercrime, specifically the unending scourge of ransomware.
Ransomware is simply the most efficient, scalable, and lucrative illicit business model ever created.
The fundamental premise, extorting an organization by encrypting their operational data, remains the same, right?
The premise is the same, yes.
But the Google analysis highlights a profound shift in the targeting parameters of these criminal syndicates. They are no longer targeting the individual endpoints or the specific database servers. They're moving down the stack. They're targeting the virtualization layer.
They're attacking the hypervisors.
Now, I have to admit, when I was reviewing the source material for this episode, well, this deep dive, this is the area where the technical depth got really intense. I understand the severity, but I need to map this out to fully grasp the mechanics.
It is deeply technical, but understanding the architecture is crucial to understanding why these attacks are so devastating.
Okay, let's go back to our high-rise building metaphor.
Good idea.
In a traditional legacy ransomware attack, the threat actor breaches the network and starts moving laterally. They go from one server to another.
Right.
It's like a burglar walking down the hallway of the high-rise, meticulously picking the locks of individual apartments, going inside, and stealing the valuables one by one.
It's effective, but it takes time.
Exactly. It takes time. And every lock they pick increases the chance they get caught by a patrol. But attacking the hypervisor, on the other hand, is entirely different. It's like the burglar completely ignoring the individual apartments, sneaking directly into the subterranean basement of the high-rise, and taking an axe to the main power conduit and the central water main.
That's it, exactly.
With one single strike, they completely paralyze every single apartment in the entire building simultaneously.
That is an exceptionally accurate visualization of the impact. To understand how they do this technically, we need to trace the evolution of enterprise IT architecture.
Okay, lay it on me.
20 years ago, if a company needed a new service, say a dedicated server for employee email and another server for the HR database, they bought two physical pieces of hardware, two literal metal boxes racked in a cold room, each running its own operating system.
Which sounds very expensive.
Massively inefficient and expensive. Most servers only utilize maybe 10% of their actual computing power.
So the industry solved the inefficiency with virtualization.
Correct. Instead of buying 10 small physical servers, a company buys one massive, incredibly powerful physical machine. This bare metal hardware is called the host.
Okay.
Then they install a highly specialized operating system directly onto that hardware. This is the hypervisor, software like VMware's ESXi or Microsoft's Hyper-V.
And what does the hypervisor actually do?
The hypervisor's sole job is to carve up the immense physical resources of the host, the CPU, the RAM, the storage, and allocate them to create dozens or hundreds of virtual machines or guests.
Ah, so to the network, it looks like 100 different Windows or Linux servers.
Yeah.
But physically, it is all just software running on one giant box in the basement.
Exactly. The hypervisor orchestrates the entire reality for those virtual machines. And this is exactly why the attackers target it.
Because if a ransomware group compromises a single Windows virtual machine, they only encrypt the files on that one machine.
Right. But if they discover a vulnerability in the hypervisor itself, say an authentication bypass in the management interface, they don't need to break into the individual virtual machines at all.
They just go for the foundation.
They simply encrypt the raw .vmdk files or virtual hard disks that the hypervisor manages. By encrypting the foundational storage layer, they instantly destroy access to all 100 virtual machines simultaneously. The email goes down, the HR database goes down, the inventory system goes down. Total catastrophic operational failure achieved in a matter of minutes.
The return on investment for the attacker is just astronomical. But this raises a pretty obvious question for me. If the hypervisor is the foundational bedrock of the entire enterprise, the single point of failure, shouldn't it be the most heavily guarded, relentlessly patched, tightly secured piece of software in the world?
You would think so.
Why are attackers consistently finding success at this specific layer?
This brings us to the most painful paradox in enterprise IT, the patching dilemma.
The patching dilemma.
It is a direct, agonizing conflict between the mandate for security and the mandate for continuous operational uptime. Let's say the vendor releases a critical security patch for the hypervisor to close a zero-day vulnerability.
Okay, so you just install it.
Well, to apply that patch at the bare metal level, the systems administrator almost always has to restart the hypervisor.
But if you restart the hypervisor,
Yeah.
you are restarting the host.
Yes. To fix the basement, you have to temporarily evict everyone in the building.
Oh, man.
Applying that patch means taking the email server, the customer database, the payment processing gateway, and the inventory system offline, all simultaneously.
And for a global enterprise or, a hospital, a scheduled downtime of even 30 minutes can cause millions of dollars in lost revenue or directly impact human safety.
Exactly. So out of sheer terror of disrupting the business, what does the IT department do? They delay the patch.
They kick the can down the road.
They schedule it for a maintenance window 3 months down the line, and they leave the foundational architecture of their entire network running on vulnerable, exploitable software for 90 days.
And the attackers know this.
The attackers absolutely know this. They map the internet, they find the exposed hypervisor management ports, and they weaponize the company's own demand for 247 uptime against them. They exploit the hesitation.
It is a devastating operational trap. And while they are exploiting the basement through technical vulnerabilities, they are also evolving how they handle the front gate. Right. They are. Because the Google report highlights that attackers are increasingly realizing that breaking cryptographic locks is just too computationally expensive. Instead of trying to brute force a password hash, they are bypassing the gates entirely by targeting the human element of the supply chain.
We are seeing a massive pivot toward advanced social engineering designed specifically to defeat multi-factor authentication.
Right. They aren't trying to guess your 6-digit code. They are using the AI voice cloning we discussed earlier.
It's all connected.
They spoof the phone number of the internal IT help desk, call the employee late on a Friday afternoon, sound exactly like the senior support technician, and say, hey, we are seeing some anomalous activity on your account. I just triggered a verification prompt to your phone. Can you read me the 6-digit code so I can clear the alert?
And the employee, thinking they are actively helping secure the network, reads the code.
And the attacker instantly uses it to bypass the MFA prompt and log in. I mean, they don't break the lock. They politely ask you to hand them the keys.
It is the path of absolute least resistance. Why spend months developing a zero-day exploit when human psychology is reliably vulnerable?
Exactly. And this combination of tactics, the hypervisor exploitation, the AI-driven social engineering, the weaponization of human psychology, it creates a landscape where economically motivated crime is just thriving.
Thriving globally.
But the Google forecast also zooms out to look at the global geopolitical stage, because the exact same vulnerabilities are being actively exploited by nation-states for vastly different, highly strategic reasons. Which brings us to the geopolitical chessboard.
And as we transition into this specific area of the forecast, it is vital that we are extremely meticulous about our framing and our perspective.
Absolutely. To you, the listener, it is critical to establish the lens through which we are examining this. We are now going to impartially relay the specific threat intelligence findings compiled in the Google Cloud Security Report regarding nation-state actors.
Right.
We are analyzing operational tactics, structural goals, and digital deployment strategies observed by threat researchers. We are not assigning ideological weight, we aren't taking political sides, and we are not endorsing the geopolitical narratives of these conflicts.
Our objective is strictly to convey the factual analysis of the cyber operations detailed in the source material.
Exactly. So with that strict operational focus established, the Google analysts have broken down the specific strategies and evolutionary shifts of 4 major state actors: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran.
And the analysis begins with Russia, where threat intelligence indicates a profound operational pivot.
What exactly does that pivot look like in the data?
It's a transition from the tactical to the strategic. In the immediate past, particularly surrounding the onset of the conflict in Ukraine, Russian cyber operations were heavily weighted towards short-term, highly visible tactical objectives.
Loud attacks.
Very loud. We saw the deployment of destructive wiper malware. This is software designed simply to erase hard drives and cause immediate chaotic disruption to localized infrastructure, communications, and logistics. It was essentially digital artillery supporting physical battlefield maneuvers.
But the 2026 forecast shows they're playing a longer game now.
Yes. The intelligence indicates a shift toward deep, persistent strategic operations. Instead of deploying loud, destructive malware, Russian state-sponsored actors are focusing on quietly infiltrating critical infrastructure, energy grids, and government networks.
And then what?
And then establishing deep persistence. They are embedding sleeper access. These are mechanisms designed to remain dormant and completely undetected for years.
Wow.
The goal is no longer just immediate disruption. It is to position themselves on the chessboard, to exert geopolitical leverage, gather long-term strategic intelligence, and possess the capability to cripple a target's infrastructure at a time of their choosing in the future.
Okay, shifting the focus to China. The report outlines that Chinese cyber operations are bifurcated into two very distinct pillars.
Yes.
The first pillar is entirely internal, focusing on regime stability. This involves the deployment of massive cyber capabilities to engineer domestic censorship, control information flow within their borders, and monitor internal networks.
The second pillar, however, is external, and it is overwhelmingly driven by economics.
Right.
The analysis characterizes China's external operations as highly aggressive, systematic, and large-scale cyber espionage.
And the targets here aren't military bases, right? They are corporate laboratories.
Exactly. The objective is to protect and rapidly advance their economic interests, specifically aiming to leapfrog Western corporate competitors in critical technological sectors.
So they are feeling R&D.
The threat actors associated with the Chinese state systematically target intellectual property, pharmaceutical research and development, advanced manufacturing blueprints, and strategic business data. If a Western company spends 10 years and billions of dollars developing a new semiconductor architecture or a clean energy patent,
The operational goal of this espionage is to just exfiltrate those blueprints, hand them to state-backed enterprises, and eliminate the R&D deficit without incurring the cost.
precisely.
That economic focus transitions us to the analysis of North Korea, specifically the Lazarus Group, who we mentioned earlier regarding that extended dwell time in the Coupang breach.
Yes, Lazarus.
Their geopolitical motivation is entirely unique among these four actors. It's not driven by global influence or corporate IP theft. It is driven by raw, existential financial necessity.
They are operating under the weight of crushing international economic sanctions, and their cyber operations are the primary mechanism to self-finance the state.
Historically, their signature methodology was the direct targeting of the financial sector. I mean, they gained infamy for massive, audacious heists targeting the SWIFT banking network, and more recently, orchestrating multi-hundred-million-dollar thefts from decentralized cryptocurrency exchanges.
And cross-chain bridges, yeah. But the Google intelligence highlights a fascinating, highly complex, and incredibly effective evolution in their tactical approach.
I have to admit, when I read this specific section of the source material, the sheer ingenuity of the operation was staggering.
It's remarkable.
North Korea is no longer just trying to hack into Western tech companies from the outside. They are systematically placing their own software engineers into high-paying, remote IT jobs directly inside the Western companies they want to target.
They're getting hired by their own victims.
Yes, it is a brilliant, multi-layered, and deeply subversive operation. But the logistical challenge is immense, right? I mean, a major tech company in Silicon Valley or London uses advanced HR verification software. They run background checks. They check IP addresses. They're not going to accidentally hire a software developer logging in from an IP block assigned to Pyongyang.
No, definitely not.
So how do they bypass the modern HR apparatus?
Through the construction of highly sophisticated physical connection farms located directly within the United States or other Western nations.
Wait, actual physical farms?
Yes. Here is the mechanical breakdown of the scheme. A North Korean operative assumes a stolen or synthesized identity. They generate a flawless resume, often utilizing AI to perfectly tailor their cover letters and code portfolios to the specific job description.
Which AI makes incredibly easy now.
Right. So when the Western company schedules a technical video interview, the North Korean engineer does not connect directly. They connect through an encrypted tunnel to a physical laptop sitting in a proxy farm in, say, Texas or California.
Oh, man. So they use a keyboard video mouse, a KVM over IP setup.
Exactly. So to the tech company's IT department, the latency, the IP address, the routing hops, and the browser footprint all perfectly match a candidate sitting in a suburban American apartment.
That is wild.
The engineer conducts the interview, writes the code, and gets the job.
And this operation achieves two massive simultaneous victories for the North Korean state. First, these engineers are earning legitimate Western tech salaries, frequently well over $100,000 a year, which are systematically funneled through complex cryptocurrency mixers and sent directly back to fund the regime.
And second
is the tactical victory. By simply completing HR onboarding, the North Korean state has successfully placed an active operative directly inside the corporate network.
They bypass the firewalls, the endpoint detection, and the autonomous immune systems we talked about earlier.
They don't have to hack the network. The IT department cheerfully issued them a corporate laptop, an employee badge, and administrative credentials.
It is the ultimate digital Trojan horse.
It really is. Now, finally, the Google forecast touches on the operational posture of Iran.
Right.
Their cyber objectives are described as largely consistent with their historical cadence. They are highly focused on maintaining internal regime stability, but externally their operations are characterized by persistent campaigns of disinformation, psychological operations, and targeted digital disruption.
And these operations are heavily directed at perceived regional and geopolitical adversaries, specifically Israel and its aligned allies.
You know, when you lay out the global chessboard like this, the strategic persistence, the economic espionage, the covert IT workers, the disinformation, it feels incredibly abstract.
You can feel that way, yes.
It feels like conflicts happening in the stratosphere of cyberspace, far removed from the day-to-day operations of a normal business or an individual listener. But the critical context here is that these spheres intersect directly.
They intersect because of the interconnected nature of the global supply chain. It is absolutely vital for you, the listener, to understand that you are not isolated from this geopolitical chessboard. You are a node on it.
Because the main fortresses are too hard to breach directly.
Precisely. If a highly capable nation-state actor wants to infiltrate a prime target, say a top-tier defense contractor, a federal energy regulator, or a massive telecommunications hub, they rarely launch a direct frontal assault against the target's primary firewalls.
It's too noisy.
Exactly. The prime target has the budget, the autonomous MDR, and the 24/7 SOC. A direct assault sets off all the alarms. Instead, the attackers look for the path of least resistance. They map out the prime target's supply chain and look for the weakest vendor.
So they target the small, seemingly unrelated business, the company that provides HVAC maintenance for the defense contractor's building, the boutique law firm that handles their regional real estate contracts, the third-party software vendor that supplies their payroll processing.
Exactly. They compromise an everyday worker at a 50-person company. They steal that worker's credentials, and then they ride that trusted vendor connection directly into the prime target's network.
And the defense contractor's firewall doesn't block the traffic because it assumes it's just the HVAC vendor logging in to check a schematic.
Right. You might look at your own small business and think, well, we don't have any data that a nation state would want. And you might be right. Your data isn't the prize. But your access is invaluable. In a hyper-connected digital economy, your security posture dictates the security of everyone you do business with.
We have covered an immense amount of ground in this deep dive today. I mean, we started with the reality of patient attackers dwelling in networks for months, utilizing the noise of the enterprise to hide. We analyzed the extortion economy and the PR engine of cybercrime.
The whole marketing side of it.
We explored the absolute necessity of shifting to autonomous, machine learning-driven defenses to fight algorithmic attacks. We unpacked the 2026 forecast of perfect polymorphic AI malware and the deep internal risks of shadow agents leaking data.
We dove into the basement of the network.
Yes, to understand why hypervisor ransomware is crippling companies. And finally, we mapped out the geopolitical motivations driving the major global powers.
It is a profoundly complex and understandably sobering threat landscape. The asymmetry between the attacker and the defender seems wider than ever.
It does,
Yeah.
which is exactly why I want to pull the entire conversation all the way back from the geopolitical stratosphere back down to the individual, to you, the listener.
Okay.
At the conclusion of the broadcast, Jorge Blanco was asked for his ultimate foundational takeaway.
Yeah.
After analyzing polymorphic AI, North Korean proxy farms, and hypervisor vulnerabilities, what is the single most important action an organization or an individual can take right now to survive this forecast?
And his answer cut through all the technical complexity. It wasn't about deploying a multi-million-dollar autonomous defense grid or buying next-generation endpoint software. His mandate was entirely focused on protecting identity.
Identity.
He hammered home the absolute non-negotiable necessity of multi-factor authentication. MFA. You must possess cryptographic certainty regarding exactly where, how, and by whom your digital identity is being used.
You know, I think for a lot of people, hearing that answer almost feels anticlimactic. I mean, we just spent an hour talking about deepfakes that can mimic a CEO's voice in real time and state-sponsored spies infiltrating HR departments. And the ultimate advice is turn on two-step verification.
It feels repetitive because the security industry has been pleading for its universal adoption for a decade. But the reality is that identity is the perimeter now. It remains the absolute baseline of all defense.
Right.
If you do not have cryptographic MFA secured, none of the advanced tools matter. It does not matter if you install a titanium vault door on the front of your house, if you leave a master copy of the key hidden under the welcome mat. Most breaches still begin with a compromised credential. MFA is the mechanism that proves the person holding the key is actually authorized to hold it.
And despite the advanced social engineering tactics designed to bypass it, MFA still stops the vast, overwhelming majority of automated credential stuffing and brute force attacks dead in their tracks.
It does.
And the silver lining highlighted in the analysis is that on a societal level, we are finally adapting. For years, people complained bitterly about the friction of MFA.
Oh, the complaining was endless.
They hated having to check their phone for a code or tap a hardware key every time they logged into their email. But that friction has slowly been integrated into our daily routines. It is now largely accepted as a normal, baseline part of digital life. We have adapted to the necessity of the double check.
That psychological and behavioral adaptation at the societal level is critical. It demonstrates that when the stakes are clearly communicated, the public can and will adopt necessary friction to enhance security.
Which brings me back to where we started our conversation today. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. A question that builds on everything we've analyzed. Think back to our opening metaphor. The internet is a 30-year-old high-rise building, constructed on a foundation of implicit trust, designed for open communication, and now completely riddled with structural cracks. We have spent this deep dive exploring how attackers are weaponizing artificial intelligence to automate and perfect their ability to exploit those foundational cracks at scale. And we have seen how the defense industry is desperately deploying autonomous algorithms to patch those holes in real time.
The endless patching.
But if the very bedrock of the architecture was never designed for security, and the weight of the attacks is growing exponentially, are we approaching a mathematical point where we can no longer simply patch the building?
It's a heavy question.
Will the realities of the 2030s require us to make an impossible choice? To tear down the very architecture of the internet, abandon the protocols of optimism, and build a new zero-trust foundation from scratch? Or are we doomed to forever live inside a crumbling structure, deploying faster and faster algorithms to endlessly patch the holes while the water continues to pour in?